what I want to do for you guys today is show you a few things that I'm doing for slow foods that actually end up being convenience foods in the long run. So I had a whole bunch of spaghetti squash, and I'm going to take you out of my stand here and I'm going to bring you over here. So here's a spaghetti squash. This is the little one. I had a whole bunch of ones that are bigger. And I think people are intimidated by squash because they think, oh, it takes so long to make and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And actually what you can do is this. I have an entire oven filled with these babies. They will cook in about, you know, at 350 degrees, they'll cook in about 20 minutes to a half hour. And then what I'm doing with them is when they come out, they look like this. And you just take your fork and you kind of shred them. Hard to do one-handed. It ends up looking like this. And then what I'm doing is I'm freezing them in my freezer. Why? Because this is like the fastest convenience meal ever. If you have a well-stocked larder, is how we would say it on the prairie, or a pantry is what most people call it, you're gonna have things in there like you want to have sauces for pastas, right? You want to have some good spaghetti sauce or something like that on hand. Maybe you have some dried or frozen veggies that you would also throw into a pasta sauce. Maybe you have some meat that you can quickly throw in there if you're a meat eater. If not, you don't have to. So it's so easy. All I'll have to do eventually is take the spaghetti squash that I've frozen. I'll just take that out of the freezer and thaw that in about 5 seconds. I throw it in a pan. I make my noodles and then I make my sauce really quick along the side. And in probably 20 minutes from freezer to table, I can have a full, balanced whole food meal that also incorporates some of that fire element and some of that earth element. So that's the first convenience hack that I have for you. Don't be afraid of the spaghetti squash if you haven't tried it. It doesn't take long to make, and even if you just go and get it at the store and you make it from beginning to end without freezing it, it doesn't take long at all to do and has a lot of health benefits for your body, and your kids will probably like it too. Okay, second thing is to have ingredients for salads on hand that are also somewhat seasonal. So, you know, salads, sometimes people think salads have to be this fussy thing. They have to be so fancy. And I just think of salads as an equation. So I have some kind of greens. I'm going to have something crunchy. I'm going to have something that tastes like cheese because I must have that. And then it's like whatever other vegetables I have laying around. I don't overthink this. I don't use recipes at all for salads. I just throw it together and then I make a really great vinaigrette. So one of the things that I like to have on hand at this time of year are dehydrated tomatoes. So if you have a friend that had a giant garden at this point in the year, they're probably really tired of dealing with tomatoes. They've probably put up all their sauces, they've done all of their canning, they're probably just done. And if you ask, if you throw a request out there, even on social media, you'll probably have 20 people that reply to you that still have some tomatoes sitting around that they don't want. Beg, borrow, steal, or buy yourself a dehydrator. They can be really inexpensive. And then you're just gonna slice your tomatoes really thinly. You're gonna put them in there, and within 24 hours, they're gonna look like this. Nice little tomato guys. And I am not lying to you. These taste like cheese when you put them in a salad. Like you just crumble them up and you throw them into your salad. So I like to have, you know, like if I have 5 seconds to run to the grocery store and buy a head of nice lettuce or some butter lettuce or some other kind of greens pack, then I'll add this. I'll add my thing that tastes like cheese. I'll add some kind of high quality protein. So I've discovered that on Amazon I can get organic chicken breast canned in water, just like tuna, but it's not gonna have all the heavy metal concerns that a lot of tuna and fish have right now. So you wanna be careful of that. And then I usually put in some kind of nut, and in the fall, I like to do, if I can get my hands on them, pecans and walnuts because they're kind of seasonal, but my husband actually has an allergy to those. So most of what we do most of the time is just to toss some almonds in there and then just make a really, really quick vinaigrette. Another thing that I do, and this is a video on slow foods, not convenience foods, but sometimes we can have the best of both worlds. So when people think of processed foods, they think, when we're talking about processed foods, we're talking about foods that have been So many different mechanical and chemical things have been done to the food so that it no longer retains its nutrition and its value anymore, and it's depleted of those things. And not only is it depleted of those things, oftentimes it's processed so far that it becomes high glycemic, causing blood sugar issues. It has a lot of artificial preservatives and flavorings in it. Perhaps it contains things that aren't so healthy for us, like soy, high fructose corn syrup. So a lot of us have in our heads that all convenience foods are bad because they all contain those things. And I was definitely one of those people for a lot of years that said only whole foods, only slow foods. But you know what? When you're making 3 or more meals a day, you don't always have time to make a perfectly awesome, organic, slow cooked meal. And sometimes you don't even have 20 minutes to throw a meal together. So when I'm in that situation, I like to make sure that I have something on hand that I can grab and go with that I know is a convenience food that's also a slow food. So one of the nutrition products that I work with in my business and personally is the Isogenics products. So there's dairy-free shakes and bars, as well as regular shakes and bars with cold processed whey protein, which is very important. If it's not cold processed, it can be very inflammatory. If it's cold processed correctly, it's actually very absorbable to your body and will help you to put on lean muscle, which is good for a lot of different reasons. I have 2 fall flavors here. So I have s'mores bar, which is so good, and then the pumpkin. And how these are not junk foods is that they are cold processed, the nutrition is maintained within the product, and it's much more absorbable even than most whole foods out there. So the information on the shakes and bars is that they are 90% bioavailable to the body. So you're actually getting more nutrition out of them, especially with the trace minerals and the different elements that are added into the shakes, like pre and probiotics and digestive enzymes, that will also help you to be getting more out of your whole foods, quote unquote whole foods. But I've come to understand that this is a whole food that is just made more absorbable to my body. And I've also gotten over the guilt that I should be making all these meals perfectly and that I shouldn't be using any kind of convenience foods, because this has been game changer for me to have that as a convenience. And it also gives me more energy then and more creative energy left over, because I'm not having to have all of these meals made all the time. When I do make a meal, then I have more creativity for it. So that's my last point here. I'm gonna just twist this a little bit. Back to our pumpkin. Okay, so pumpkins, a lot of people think that these are just for decoration this time of year, for Halloween or Thanksgiving, and it's really pretty to use for that. And it was years into my adult life before I thought to myself, I guess I could eat those pumpkins that I grow. And they have so many amazing, health benefits with the pumpkin. But without going into all that science, from a traditional standpoint, again, we would see this as something that represents a lot of earth element, which is something that helps us to come home to ourselves. It helps us to come home to our bodies. It creates a sense of home in your home. So if you want to go the convenient route, just go and get a higher quality canned pumpkin. That's totally fine. Otherwise, you can roast the pumpkin just like I showed you. You can do the spaghetti squash. So you're just going to have it. You're going to take out the guts and you're going to put it on a pan and roast it for about a half hour, and it'll be really soft at that point. My very favorite thing to do with pumpkin this time of year is to make a Thai pumpkin soup, and it doesn't take long at all. So I like to have always in our freezer, you can see this just came out of the freezer, we have some kind of soup stock that we've made. We've cooked down some kind of a carcass and we've made stock with it, and we just have these on hand. Now, if I take this out of the freezer and I run it under some cold water in the sink, it is probably thawed enough for me to pour it into a pan. It'll still be somewhat frozen, but to get it out of the jar, probably within 5 minutes. So this is not something that takes a long time to do at all. So if I'm going to make the Thai pumpkin soup, I would roast the pumpkin, and then I'd have some stock, so you could buy your stock as well. And then any kind of, Asian sort of flavors you're going to toss in there. Because remember, we're bringing in that fire element as well. So with this one, we have the earth element from the pumpkin, the fire element from our spices. So things like ginger, cayenne, we're gonna put cilantro in there because you cannot have the pumpkin soup without the cilantro. That's like the best part of it. Anything that's like an Asian spice blend, Chinese 5-spice, like it doesn't have to be specific. I rarely use recipes. I just go off of how it smells and how it tastes to me as I'm cooking it. I just taste test. And then the last element, and it's a little unexpected, but one of the things that makes that Thai pumpkin soup so good is having some of the umami and the fatty flavors from adding something like peanut butter, or if you're allergic to peanuts or you're concerned about that being inflammatory, then you could use sun butter and put like maybe, you know, a couple good old scoops there into your soup pot and mix that all together and just kind of let it simmer down for a while. Now that might not be a super fast meal, but you could probably have it done within 30 to 45 minutes. And it's an amazing experience to smell all those incredible smells in your house as well. If you want to be really authentic, you're going to toss some fish sauce in there too and some lemongrass, which is so good for your immunity this time of year. So we've kind of hit all the nails on the head, just simply with some nutrition, just simply with what foods we're choosing. We're actually balancing out the elements that are in excess. We're bringing in the elements that are a little bit depleted right now. We're helping to ground ourselves. We're helping to warm ourselves. We're creating a sense of home, and we're not taking a ton of time to do it. So it doesn't need to be a 5-course meal that you make for your family every night. It can be as simple as a soup. It can be as simple as a really fast spaghetti squash pasta dish, or if you're having one of those fall nights where you're running and going to sporting events, music events, different practices, music lessons, and it's just like, then feel like you can let yourself off the hook a little bit and go for some well thought out, well researched, convenient slow food solution. So if you're